For more on this, we've reached Bobby Cameron. He is the chief of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, and he is in Montreal Lake Cree Nation, Saskatchewan. Chief Bobby Cameron, welcome to the show.
Hi, good afternoon.
I want to thank you first off for joining us during what must be a very difficult time. And I have to ask, what went through your mind when you heard that there were potentially as many as 751 unmarked graves?
Well, the initial emotions were obviously ones of shock, disbelief, anger, being upset, to name a few. It's unreal that how many unmarked graves that they found there in Cowessess.
I want to make sure I understand correctly. People knew this was a burial ground, correct? They just didn't know precisely how many people may have been buried there. Am I correct in that understanding?
Oh yeah, they knew the burial grounds, and the survivor stories have told us time and time and time again for decades the amount of people that have disappeared and were never seen without a trace. Those stories have been told. So this was something that we've known all along, and with this discovery only confirms what we've known all along. It's just now that the world is starting to believe, governments are starting to believe.
Chief Cameron, do we have a sense yet of how many of these unmarked graves may have belonged to children versus, say, adults? And do we know if they're all connected with the residential school, or could people from the broader surrounding area have been buried there?
Yeah, we don't know the exact number or those exact details, but what we do know is that there are definitely children in the unmarked graves, and there are adults. So obviously there's a lot of work to do for Cowessess and the other sites that we're going to be doing the same work on. We're going to find more bodies. We have the highest attended schools in the country. We have the most residential schools in the country here in Saskatchewan. And with those numbers, you can only expect that there were higher cases of torture, abuse, and death.
Chief Cadmus Delorme of the Cowessess First Nation said the next steps are to identify the names of who is buried in these graves. I mean, how difficult do you think that process will be?
Yeah, it'll be challenging for sure, but one that the First Nation and other First Nations are going to see to the end. We are going to go the distance because our survivors, our descendants, deserve that peace. They deserve the healing to continue.
Some of the records, I suspect, that could help with the identification of who exactly is buried there would likely be in the possession of the Catholic Church. Do you have a sense yet whether they'll cooperate with this and turn it over what you need?
Well, I'll say this. I'm going to say this publicly. And I can't speak for anybody, but if they don't abide by or listen to the direction that is being given to them by survivors, descendants, and leadership, and that is release all records from the church, release all records from the federal government. Those are our records. It's not your records. And for the Pope to continue to deny the apology at a residential school site, that in itself is an act of ignorance. And I'll say this publicly: if he doesn't do that, if he doesn't do this, I would be willing to renounce myself as a Catholic Church supporter, my Catholic Church religion as well.
So you would leave the faith if you don't get the apology?
Well, of course I would. I mean, of course I would. How hard is it for him to say, "We are very sorry, we apologize, how can we help you heal"? It's not very difficult for the Pope to do this as part of the healing journey. It's just a part of it, yeah.
A question I have about the unmarked graves, sir, is Chief Delorme said that at one point there may have been markers and headstones and markings of some point at the graves, and that he says the Catholic Church removed them. Why did that happen? Do you know? Is it simply to cover up the existence of the graves? Why would these markers be removed?
Well, for sure, without a doubt, they were trying to cover up the amount of children that were being mistreated and killed in those institutions. For sure they were. So was the federal government of the day. It was a disgusting act on their part, and something that has to be followed up on after all this is said and done. The accountability, to hold those individuals all accountable for their despicable, disgraceful actions committed on our First Nation children.
Chief DeLorme said he had some contact with a local Catholic church in the wake of the investigation that has happened here and confirmed this number of grave sites. Have you gotten any sense or response from the local Catholic officials as to what they intend to do going forward here?
Well, I will say this, they know what we've been saying all along. They're hearing it, and now it's just a matter of action, implementing our direction. So we're always optimistic, right? We have to be optimistic that they're gonna take the direction from our survivors, our descendants, and our leadership, and that's release all records immediately.
You're calling for a full, independent, and public review into the deaths of the children and whoever else is buried at this site. How do you see that work differing from the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Because
now, obviously with the discovery of the bodies, it only enhances and enlightens the tragic lives of our First Nation children. Now the world believes, governments believe. Now it's time for action. That's the difference.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he put out a statement today saying in part that the hurt and trauma felt is Canada's responsibility to bear. And he said that the government will continue to provide Indigenous communities with funding and resources they need. What do you make of the Prime Minister's words?
Yeah, no, we're thankful and grateful for their commitment, as well as Premier Scott Moe for their commitment. They're working with us, they're communicating with us, and it's a good start. I'm going to say that it's a good start. However, this is going to take quite some time. It could take several years, and we hope they remain committed in the coming years, because our survivors and descendants deserve the proper healing journey to happen. I want to say this on a lasting note. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, sir. You go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say this on a lasting note. We try to put ourselves in the eyes and in the bodies of these children who have been recently found in the ground, waiting to be found, waiting to have a proper burial, waiting to be properly recognized in our own customs, laws, and traditions, and finally being found. And a small First Nation voice says, "They found us. They found us."
And what do you think it means for them to hear that voice saying they found us?
Closure. Healing can continue.
I'd like to ask you one more question, if you'll indulge me. I know you said you wanted an apology from the Pope, and you said if it doesn't get to that point, that you would very likely renounce your Catholic faith. There is a delegation of leaders and church officials going to the Vatican later this year, and there's been some optimism expressed by church leaders that the papal apology could in fact be something that could come out of this. What would it mean to you to see that papal apology delivered here in Canada as requested in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission?
Well, for our survivors and descendants, it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's part of the healing journey. And to get that apology from the Pope would help and assist in that healing journey for so many of our survivors right across this country. That's what it means.
Okay. Chief Bobby Cameron, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, take care. Have a good day.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.